a Australian DJ that we were, you know, as people that don't review a lot of EDM, I think we review like the big artists. We were pretty impressed with, I think what we got from Flume. With I believe Skin in 2016 was really the album where I came onto him,
Mhm.
and he's just been kind of present. I think especially our love for the new Pope really like jettisoned some of his music
Oh yeah,
into my zeitgeist with
forgot
Never Be
about
Like
that.
You, and he just dropped a new album titled Palaces.
Yep, third album.
Dave, did this continue the upward trajectory for you of Zoom in your mind?
Yeah, well, I think that the thing with Flume is it's been a while, right? We haven't talked about him, haven't heard much of anything from him since that Hi This Is Flume mixtape in early 2019. So this is his first release of the pandemic, and I think he's definitely shown a lot of qualities that I like in DJs in terms of the more zany production and varied sonic palette, and just trying to mix it up in a way that's at least interesting to the ear and not as homogenized and monotonous as some other more popular in vogue house music is these days. So Flume is definitely not one of those guys. On the other hand, he does have some more popular traditional stuff. I think of some of his bigger hits, like the Tuvlo song "Say It." You know,
Mm.
more traditional 2010s EDM goes, but I think Flume still has enough going on under the hood that makes him interesting for people that aren't like hardcore electronic music fans. And definitely was looking forward just to hearing what this was going to be, because I really did not know uh, what to expect. And I think Palaces was definitely a fun listen for all those reasons. I thought it was pretty varied and, in a sense, all over the place. But when it comes to electronic music, that's what I want. And just for the sake of things being interesting, that's like a full length listen. You know, if a DJ is going to go beyond being a performer at clubs and actually put out a full length record, I want it to be an engaging listen. I thought the Swedish House Mafia comeback album
Yeah.
uh, exceeded my expectations for similar reasons. So I think Flume with Palaces did a pretty admirable job. There was a bunch of songs I thought were pretty cool.
Yeah, you know, in listening to this and thinking about the songs that really stick out to me from Flume, and he definitely pushes the boundaries and is always doing interesting stuff. I think that continued. I think there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff. It sounds very modern. I think is like the word that comes to mind because I think about like Gex or
Mm.
Charlie XCX. Carolyn Polachek is actually featured on this, but some of her music comes to mind in terms of the production on this, like really stilted and jumbled type production, some real like out there like beat drops and actual music just kind of like dropping out with some very like sparse sounds. So I definitely think there's a lot of things he's going for on here. I found myself at times being a little bit like bored by parts of the album. Not gonna lie, I think his like he can make really beautiful songs, but sometimes it's almost like too beautiful for the sake of like I'm not as interested anymore, and I want the next track to come. But overall, I definitely think this is an admirable addition to his album collection.
Yeah, yeah, totally. He talked about decamping to his native Australia during the start of the pandemic and being more attuned with nature during the creation of this album, away from Hollywood and all that. And it's funny, like when you hear some of these songs, they definitely bring like a more like natural sound at times. Some of these
Mhm.
songs, it's like the electronic cacophony of like birds almost without just
Yeah.
making a bird noise. And it's like, huh, cool, interesting. Don't know if I necessarily need to like vibe to the fake sounds of the outdoors. It's a bit unusual, but I think to your point about like the modern sound, there is some pretty blatant hyper pop
Mm.
influence on a few of these tracks. I thought highest building
Oh yeah.
track one was pretty awesome. You have that vocal melody of the feature Oklo, and then the like repeatedness of the melody in the beat later
Mhm.
on sounded very much like hyperpop, like Gex and all that. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then more on the banger side, you have something like OnlyFans, which also
Mhm.
brings that to mind.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think those two stood out. You know, a couple others that stood out to me. Like Escape has that like chime in the beginning that reminds me a lot of some of his earlier stuff, like Never Be Like You. But it actually like becomes a pretty like in like pretty traditional house song for a little bit.
Yeah.
But then it has some like interest. It like brings back that like wind chime in it that I think is like a really nice touch throughout. Um, a song that I'm like 50-50 on his Jasper song.
Mm,
Sometimes when I listen to it, I'm like, man, this piano is just
right.
boring me. And then there's other times where I'm like, it starts to become pretty I don't know, pretty weirdly mixed and stilted, and it like builds on itself. And I'm like, oh no, this is actually like pretty dope. So I don't, that one just kind of grabs me at different points. Did you have any takes on Jasper song?
Yeah, I thought the piano definitely stood out to me. I think if anything, the idea of that song kind of reminds me of the Porter Robinson album
Mm,
that we talked about recently, his comeback album Nurture, which again for the same reasons, like I think a notable uh, EDM album for just kind of engaging you in unusual ways. So yeah, a bit of a synergy there. Um, I think it is cool that Flume is just kind of bringing all kinds of sounds going on. I mean, he cited and actually worked with Sophie a little bit on the High This Is Flume mixtape, and uh, Sophie seems to have rubbed off on Flume in a good way. So, I think to the more traditional side of things, you have track two, Say Nothing, very, very similar to the Tuvlo track of his past, but that Maya feature performance is just really strong, you know,
yeah,
tough to argue with that. I didn't love the Carolyn Polachek performance, to be
me
honest. I
neither.
thought it was kind of a weird song, honestly.
Ending the album with Polachek and then Damon Albarn, I had really high expectations, and I thought Palace's ends pretty cool, but Albarn on that is also pretty toned down. However, I think Go, which is in between them,
Yeah,
was like a nice like pick me up near the end of the album, which was kind of needed. I was definitely losing interest by then. So overall, I think Flume continues to just be a creator that I'm interested in, and I like hearing I think his singles more so than the albums. I think he just kind of like will drop a track and I'll be like, wow, that's really inventive or creative. So someone to stay tuned into for sure.